Attackers have come up with a novel new way of injecting malicious code into websites.
Jim, I hear you have a story on a new PHP web shell attack.
Yeah, this one was really kind of interesting. I hadn't seen anything like this one before. The article, it was in the Security Affairs blog, was pointing out a new attack which they've been attributing to the Mage Cart attackers. In this case, what they were doing, though, is they were injecting code that pointed to a fake favicon. These are the little images that show up in the tabs in your web browser. And what they were doing is they were putting a fake image there, but instead of actually being an image, it included some PHP code that they managed to get another part of the web page to execute. And this injected some code into the browser that would steal credentials, passwords, or credit cards. And this article actually pointed out that there was a similar attack about a year ago, also attributed to the Mage Cart folks, that did something similar, but they injected their malicious code into the metadata of image files. And it was JavaScript code that they were injecting. So I hadn't actually noticed that a year ago, but when these guys pointed that out, some interesting techniques that the attackers are using to, inject malicious code into, both on the server side and on the client side. I'm not sure that there's any particular protections that, a user can do to keep their credit card or credentials from being skimmed this way. This is something that the folks running the web server need to, be running some sort of file integrity tool on their web server so that they become aware when new files may be injected onto their server. But I thought this one was kind of ingenious, actually, as much as I hate to give the bad guys any credit. Inserting their malicious code in a file that most of us wouldn't ever bother looking at, and then injecting some additional code that caused the PHP code in the favicon file to be executed. So it was a new attack to me, and I thought it might be interesting to our viewers. I had never seen anything like this one before.
Yeah, this seemed like a very interesting story. I would think on the server side, maybe a web application firewall would help prevent this type of attack. They may not protect, I guess they may need some updates if this is like a novel attack to pick out the new PHP shell script, but possibly, I would hope that possibly would be a way to help it out.
Yeah, possibly. I hadn't really given that a whole lot of thought, but possibly.
When I was in school so many years ago, people were presenting ideas about like how to hide information in other file types. How to hide data in a PNG file. And it's interesting, over the past 5 years, pretty much everything that at the university level people like theorized about, 20 years ago is happening. hiding things in the least significant bit, just appending the data to the end of the PNG file, taking the metadata of the PNG file and sticking the malicious code in there. It just shows, I guess, the resourcefulness of the adversaries. It might show, and I'm not sure what this indicates, like taking a PNG file and sticking PHP code in it. Is that because security solutions are so much better? Is that because, that's the only place to hide your PHP shell? Is it because users are or admins are much more like educated about malicious things to look for? Or what is it that really causes the adversaries to go to these lengths to hide PHP code inside of like a favicon? Because there's a problem they're trying to solve, and I'm curious what that might be.
Yeah, well, and admins will look for new, PHP files or JS files being dropped, on their web servers. But, a new image, does anybody really look at the contents of the image files, the PNG files or the JPEG files or whatever? And, to then embed the executable code inside that and then make a little tweak to another part of the web application to get it to execute that executable code that is hidden in a file type that is not normally where you'd look for executable code. That was the part that really fascinated me. I wouldn't have thought to look there. And obviously, that's what the bad guys are counting on, that we're not going to think to look there for executable code.
But the converse of it is it's such a unique strategy for the bad guy that once it's uncovered, it's like really easy to detect it. And, their uniqueness also makes them very attributable and makes it easy to detect them going forward if you know this one technique. Because it is kind of like out there, like, oh, I got PHP in my PNG file.
Yeah, well, in this particular case, yes, you look for, you compare the file type, run the, the Linux file command against it, and it would say, no, this isn't really a PNG file. So, it would flag it there. But, the other related one, the one from last year where they stuck the JavaScript in the metadata, the copyright EXIF field, and then they executed that JavaScript out of there, that was a perfectly legitimate, JPEG file or whatever, but it was the metadata that had the executable code in it. That's going to be harder. That's going to be harder to catch. And it's, as I say, probably every time I'm on the show, it's one of these things where it's a constant arms race. The bad guys do something, so we've got to find a way to detect it and protect against it, and then they'll try something else. And they'll continue to use this one until we find a way to stop it, and then they'll move on to the next one. So it's, as I've said a number of times, is why I'm not worried about job security. The bad guys are going to be there until I'm ready to retire. So.